Right, hello and welcome to Introduction to Games Development. I thought I'd try this again because I tried it yesterday and I uploaded everything to YouTube and I noticed that I had everything in reverse. And also, one little ick factor was I noticed I'm a morning person, so I'm far more energetic in the morning and can probably do a far better presentation in the morning. So, welcome to to Games Development. Intro to Game Development, and that's, of course, the Joker from Mortal Kombat 11. And this is just a brief overview introduction to the module. So, the module code is COMP07028 and the title is Intro to Game Development. I'm your module coordinator, Dr. Thomas Haney, and I'm just back from the gym. I have a Superman fixation and far better at doing presentations in the morning, far more energetic. I hope that you enjoy this sort of delivery, as I said in the sort of previous one that I put up, because I'd much prefer to be animated and sort of talk through the slides. If you don't like this sort of delivery, then I can just simply talk through the slides in a sort of PowerPoint record. So, that's my name. You can call me Thomas, Tommy, or Tom, according to the Aula website, not website, Aula VLE. There's my email address. My mobile number is also there, so that's 0771 267 3509. And if you have any difficulties whatsoever, then please feel free to give me a phone. I've also included my LinkedIn profile, so feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. So I'm going to put these slides up in their sort of bare form, and then you can follow the video through if you want as you sort of read the slides. At least that's the idea. And let me know how you sort of like that. I've also got a Discord identifier or username or whatever, so you can contact me on Discord as well. So all of this is going to be appearing on Aula, the new VLE, and only an American can actually pronounce it. Aula, Aula. It's an American system, I think. So when a Scottish person tries it, it doesn't really work. Aula. Hola, pal. Okay, so that's what I look like. I look like this today. It's definitely me. Okay, and that's me in my office next to Pennywise the clown, and I have a Pennywise here as well. So that's absolutely fine. So there's all my contact details. Labs, this will obviously be at home this year because of the COVID-19 situation. I'll ask you to try a little sort of game in Game Maker 8.1 Lite to see if we can actually get it working at home. A link will be made available on Aula to all of these things, and hopefully you'll be able to sort of get it working. Game Maker 8.1 Lite is a relatively simplistic games engine, so you can either try the sort of coursework in Game Maker 8.1 Lite. I'm quite happy to entertain Unreal and Unity as well, depending on what people want to actually sort of do. Okay. So in terms of an activity, I've got a sort of ice-breaking activity on Aula as well, and we'll do that possibly later today or this week. And basically it's introducing yourself, giving your name, your degree stream. Most of the students in this year, every person in the class will either be from computer animation arts or computer games development. So I'm actually the program lead of computer games development, so I'll be watching them particularly closely. So why you would like to be a games developer or an animator, say that as well. Where you want to be in possibly 4 years' time. Whether that's going to be working in the industry, possibly going on to further study, whatever you want. Name your favourite Marvel DC character. You can probably guess mine. Favourite Star Wars character, favourite Lord of the Rings character. Doesn't have to be this exhaustive list. Favourite video game and favourite video game character as well. So I like Magneto from the X-Men, misunderstood villain, moves metal, all that kind of stuff. Absolutely love him. Love Michael Fassbender's depiction and Ian McKellen's depiction. Also like Superman, he's fantastic because he's basically all of these people combined, all the superheroes anyway. Going to be along with a Marvel character, that one, or a Marvel villain. I also like Emperor Palpatine from Star Wars, so yes, let the hate flow through your Master Yoda, you survived. So I can do an okay Palpatine impression. Like Sauron, like all the sort of bad guys, so like Lord of the Rings. So Sauron's my favourite character from that. Ridiculous. Loki is probably one of my favourite characters in the Avengers. My favourite sort of video games for the PlayStation 4 that you can probably see there is Marvel Superheroes, the Lego one. I thought that was absolutely brilliant. Really enjoyed that. Love my Zelda games as well. My favourite is probably the Ocarina of Time and the Nintendo 64. Absolutely love Street Fighter, although the Street Fighter I'm sort of talking about would be from probably 1992 in the Super Nintendo. So I got into Street Fighter there. Absolutely love M. Bison because he's just the best. And Scorpion from the Mortal Kombat series, he's possibly my favourite from there, but I do quite like the bad guys in that, so like Shang Tsung as well, Shao Kahn. Once again, that was probably from the same sort of era that I get addicted to that, but 1992. Also love all the sort of Super Mario games. I've got various Super Mario games. My favourite is probably Super Mario Odyssey at the minute. So the games that I'm into just now, and they're all sort of here, is Super Mario Odyssey. I've got Super Mario 3D All Stars as well, and I've just recently bought them for the Switch. And I like all the sort of Zelda games as well. So I've got Zelda Link's Awakening. I first completed Zelda Link's Awakening in 1993 in the original Game Boy. And then I also got it for the Nintendo Switch Lite. And as you can see, I have both a Nintendo Switch and Nintendo Switch Lite, and I've got a Wii as well. I managed to wake the Windfish in 1993, and I woke him again just recently there at Christmas. So it's all cool. And then I like my Super Mario games, so Super Mario 64 and the Nintendo 64, big fan of that. And then Super Mario Sunshine and the Nintendo GameCube. I've recently sort of pawned my Nintendo GameCube to get more games. And then of course Super Mario Galaxy, which I believe was in the Nintendo Wii. Absolutely love these games. Zelda Breath of the Wild, because I'm kind of old, these games, I do like them, but they're not quite the games I was used to. So for example, I sort of got the axe, which was just at the beginning of this game. I got the axe, and then I was about to sort of use the axe, and I threw it into an expanse of water, had to swim into the water, and then ended up drowning. So I'm not very good at these games anymore, because technological requirements have advanced, I suppose. And this is a game that I want to severely get into this year, because I've promised a small child that I would, and I can't break my promise to him, so I need to play Fortnite with him. Okay. So the course structure, there's going to be 12 lectures. There's obviously going to be working at home, which will entail some of the following. So watching the lectures for a start, trying the practical labs, possibly, you're definitely going to be producing a games design document, possibly developing a small prototype or proof of concept game, and producing a small 5-minute showreel of your game idea. So that's what we're sort of looking at. In terms of the course structure, today is going to be an introduction, a sort of coursework brief, and then possibly for self-study you can install GameMaker 8.1 Lite and familiarise yourself with it. So you can take that as a sort of weekly basis. Next week we're going to look at the game's design document. It's quite in-depth, to be honest, because there is no real industrial standard for a game's design document, but we will try and produce one, because for the computer games development people this will be a sort of basis for all of the courseworks anyway. Then there's a sort of clown lab that you can possibly try and complete, and also you can start the game's design document coursework as well. The week after that, we're going to look at computer games terminology and basic animation terminology. So obviously when you're in a profession, you're in a particular epistemological frame. In order to get people to sort of understand what you're talking about, you have to use the lingo, terminology, vernacular of that particular profession. So that's what we're going to be talking about there. Next week after that, we're going to look at what makes a good game, all the constituents that make a good game, story, narrative, things like that, objects, graphics, how they become motivational. And I'll show you some examples of the games that I have liked during the course of my life. And then we'll look at game mechanics, things like satellite mechanics, primary game mechanics, secondary game mechanics, that sort of thing. And during self-study, you're looking at 1945, which is a scrolling shooter game. These two weeks, if you can actually get the Game Maker sort of working at home. And I hope you can. I think probably it's easy enough. And then the game mechanic, we're looking at a sort of either a maze game or a platform game, if you prefer. Depends on what particular genre you're wanting to possibly implement. Okay. After that, we might have a consolidation week, but it's entirely up to you guys. I don't necessarily have to have one, but if you feel that the information is coming at you too rapidly, then we can have a sort of short break week that week anyway. Then we're looking at the psychology of play, why people actually play computer games, looking at sort of motivational theory and things like that. And play is particularly important to children, for example, in terms of conflict resolution. So we'll look at that quite in depth. The next is a series of lectures on history, starting from the 1940s, so computer games history, part 1, and then we're going to go straight back to where it all began in the 1940s and work up to the present, or at least try to work up to the present. And it's actually quite an interesting story how all of this transpired. The first 2 lectures are probably before any of you were even born, and actually before I was born, my goodness. And then we'll try to get up to the present. So you can either sort of during your spare time either work in the games design document or the assessment game during this time. We'll then look at software development lifecycle methodologies and games development lifecycle methodologies, software testing techniques. That's very, very interesting as well. And we'll also look at game engines, primarily being Unity, Unreal, and Game Maker. There's various different sort of versions of Game Maker now, so we'll look at that and see what particular games have actually been developed in them. So that's what I've sort of got planned. I may add in some additional lectures, possibly about story, narratology and ludology, the constant battle between ludology and narratology, to see who sort of wins. I sort of know who wins narratology, the old school. Ludology is a sort of newer school of thought. Serious games as well, I may add in a lecture on that, which is game for educational and training purposes. That's sort of my research area that I quite enjoy. And we might add in things about gameplay and playability, but it really depends on how well we're sort of doing. In the practical sessions, I'm going to propose 2 options for a coursework. We're going to be using Game Maker 8.1 Lite because it's free. And there's the link to it there. So if you follow that link, you'll be able to download it onto your machine at home, hopefully, ideally. It's not the latest version, and Yo-Yo Games don't actually support it anymore, and it's not compatible with other versions of Game Maker, but you can use other versions of Game Maker if you want. I'd imagine the computer games development people will get very, very sort of into this and want to experiment with all the games engines, and that's all cool. But computer animation students, computer animation art students, may wish to just simply concentrate on the drawing, and that's equally fine as well. They may wish to produce a game, they may not. Okay, so that's Yo-Yo Games, good stuff. All of the resources are going to be made available on Aula. And for each of these games, there's a zip file containing the instructions, sounds and images, and you can try them at home. There's also YouTube links to how to complete these things. The first sort of bunch of instructions for the Catch the Clown game is very, very prescriptive, very detailed, and then after that they sort of start to expect you to know things and become a little bit more shambolic, I suppose. So that's a very, very good one to follow. The scrolling shooter requires you to know a little bit more in terms of the textual descriptions. So there are sort of YouTube videos there to help you through that as well. And it's quite interesting. So there's a few sort of maze games as well. The maze game is probably about the easiest sort of permutation. And then you can also look at platform games if you're into it. So the tutorials were developed by Mark Overmars. He developed Game Maker. He's a Dutch scientist, I believe. Okay, the first one, as I said, is acceptable, and then after that they sort of assume that you know things. There are a few books called the Game Maker's Apprentice, I believe is one of them, on Game Maker if you're wanting to buy them. Now the idea of buying the book is that you actually get the resources, the graphics and everything with it. So if you just go onto the internet and type in the book title and the PDF, one is The Game Maker's Apprentice, the other one is The Game Maker's Companion, if I remember correctly. And if you put in PDF, probably the book will fly up and you'll get a free version. But you don't get the resources with it. So the idea of buying a programming book is that you actually get the coding resources with it. Okay. Lecture 4 is going to be based in a small paper written by Mark Overmars about what makes a good game. So I'm going to put that up and you can read that in your own time as well. But also in lecture 4, I will go through all the main points and I will make sure that I highlight the main points. You don't really necessarily need to read that. I've been kind and benevolent that way and adding in my own sort of style. Okay. So the first one is a Catch the Clown practical that you should possibly look at. So there's a little thing that looks like Krusty the Clown going about here and you have to catch him. And you can follow the tutorial. It's very, very easy. If people are having difficulty with this, I can even make a video on how to do it in probably maybe 5-10 minutes. But we'll see. Hopefully people won't need or require that level of support. But anyway, there it is, Catch the Clown. And I always had a slight joke here where Pennywise the Clown would appear because I was addicted to Stephen King's It. You know, hi Georgie, what a nice book, you want it back? And then I would switch to this and it would come up and scare all the people in the class, particularly those with chlorophobia or chlorophobia, whatever you call it, fear of clowns. Dear. But obviously that loses its effect in this particular scenario in my living room. But anyway, never mind. The next one is the 1945, which is a sort of scrolling shooter. You might want to do a sort of permutation of this. I give you ideas later on in lecture 4. You might want to do a sort of permutation where you just replace all the assets and possibly make it into a sort of space shooter game. We've had that before. So then there's a sort of maze game, can be like a sort of Zelda type game. But you can then choose your own sort of genre. So if you work through all of these, then you can choose which particular one you're wanting. So here's a sort of platform. It's the most difficult one, obviously, to implement, and quite clearly it's a rip-off of Super Mario Brothers 2. But anyway, you can do that if you so choose. Depends how sort of deeply you get into this and how much you sort of want to work, I suppose. So week 3, you should be able to begin to work on your game's design document, so that's absolutely fine. And the game's design document will be a sort of constant fixture or feature through the entire course. Okay. So attendance, there is no attendance this year because we're all working remotely because of COVID-19. Yay! For this module anyway. But engagement with assessment is of course compulsory. So failure to submit an assessment will result in you having to resit or re-attend the module. So for computer animation arts students, this is in fact an optional module. You may possibly carry a credit deficit into the second year, but you don't want to do that. And for computer games development students, it is in fact a core module, and therefore if you fail it, you may not be allowed to progress depending on the credits. Okay? So this is the easiest module in the history of ever. So you should be able to pass it, and it's quite a fun module as well. So that's why it's called Intro to Games Development. So basically no one fails this module. I've not seen it happen very often unless they don't submit something. But because of all the confusion with COVID-19, don't get into the sort of relaxed position of, well, they won't notice if someone doesn't, hand in things. The marks all have to come from somewhere, and we're very, very thorough about where marks come from. So you have to submit something in order to pass it. So, okay. Assessment, here is what I'm proposing. I'm proposing 2 options for assessment. Now let me know what you think of this. So option 1 is a very large games design document, which could be worth 90%, and a showreel pitch idea, which is worth 10%. You could do this in a group of 2, preferably with a mixture of 1 person from computer animation arts and possibly 1 from computer games development, however you wish to organise yourself. You can also do it on an individual basis as well. For computer animation arts, I have seen students in the past submit things like scrolls that are absolutely brilliant. So you may wish to focus on your drawing perhaps, or your sort of creativity, and just go for that particular option. I may make the two of them an option in the coursework brief. Depends on really what you want. We'll possibly try a little sort of poll or whatever. Option 2 is the games design document will be significantly diminished. I expect computer games development people to go for this option or prefer this option. It depends on the technology you've got at home. Okay, so this is where the games design document will be worth about 40%. If we all submit a sort of draft, regardless of which option, by week 8, then I can give feedback, etc. And then you can do a game if you so desire, if you're wanting to actually produce a game. Probably best to produce a game. If you can't produce a game at this level, then you're going to have difficulty at a later level. So that's going to be worth 50%, and it's going to be submitted in week 13. So that's going to be either produced in GameMaker 8.1 Lite, or you can use any particular game engine that you want. The only reason I suggest that is that it's free. Unity is also free, so is Unreal. So it really depends what you're wanting to do. And then a video playthrough, which is also submitted at that point as well, which is worth 10%. So those are two options, okay? Right. We're not really allowed to post up marks on Aula. I will give you detailed feedback and tell you what I propose as your mark, okay? And you'll have the opportunity to clarify points, etc. Basically, my marking scheme is as watertight as a mermaid's brassiere, and I know full well where every mark comes from. So we can have a conversation about it if you're unhappy, and if you manage to get an extra mark out of me, then you're doing pretty well. But quite happy to have a discussion with you about it. That's the nature of feedback. Marks have to be moderated and approved by an external examiner. So essentially, if you disagree with the final mark that appears on banner, you're not just sort of disagreeing with myself, it's disagreeing with the moderation, and it's disagreeing with the external examiner. So these things are marked 3 times really by different people at different levels to ensure equality and make sure that it's equitable. Okay. Handwritten dates, links will be provided on Aula for all submissions of the coursework. These are variable. We can change these a little bit. I've sort of proposed the 22nd of November at 7 p.m, which is a Sunday, for the game design document draft. So you can submit that then and then get feedback. And then I've also proposed, again, this is quite variable. We can discuss this. The 23rd of, I should say, December and not November, unfortunately. The 23rd of December, the Wednesday before we go on holiday for Christmas. But we can make that date different. We can bring it substantially closer, or perhaps into January. So that's the thing to remember there. According to university policy, I'm supposed to say this: if you submit an assessment up to 1 week late, you lose 10% of the available marks. And if you submit later, you get 0. I do not care about that sort of thing. It's just to make you aware that some lecturers do in fact care a great deal about it. I've got too much on to care about such things. So as long as you hand everything in and I've got time to mark it, I'm quite happy. I realise that people might require extensions and things like that based on their personal circumstances. Things happen. Life happens, you know. So the video playthrough, you can use screen capture software. Some of the honours students, I asked them on Discord, have suggested Open Broadcaster software, so that's free. There's a link there for it. Easy Screen, again, supposed to be free and easy to use. And then there's a few others there that I've proposed from previous years. I'm not entirely certain. You can use your mobile phone as well, as we always sort of do. And here's, some guidelines. Generally, the file can be a bit too big when it's an MP4 to possibly be put on Moodle or Aula or the VLE or whatever it is. So I suggest that you set up a YouTube account or something like that if you don't have one already, and upload the file from your phone or tablet or whatever, and send a link. Hopefully everyone sort of knows how to do this by now, and imagine you're all sort of technologically literate. Generally, if the video is about 5 minutes long, then full marks are awarded. If the game is complex enough, okay? So it's either going to be a sort of brief, proof of concept or pitch idea, depending on whether you actually produce a game or do a games design document, an extensive games design document, or it can be a playthrough on your actual game. So being quite nice there. Guidelines. You can record your own voice. This acts as a sort of critical appraisal. It draws attention to things that you're in fact proud of, where you got all of the resources, that sort of thing. Animation students tend to be incredibly good at this, and I often look forward to watching their videos because they're absolutely brilliant. Games development students, not necessarily so much, but I mean it does act as a small sort of critical appraisal, so you can describe your assets and the idea behind the game. Point out the interesting functionality. Try not to swear too much when you're actually doing it. It was quite funny because some people, when they develop a game, they make it too difficult even for themselves to complete. And I remember laughing quite a lot at this German student who nearly got to the end of his game and then died at the last moment. And you could just imagine, you know, the expletives that sort of came out of him. So it was funny, and a broad German accent. It was like Arnold Schwarzenegger having a good swear. So try not to swear. It's unprofessional. I try not to swear, even though I do secretly swear like a trooper in my normal life. I think everyone does nowadays. And with Stephen Fry on the subject, it is rather cathartic. But try not to swear professionally in presentations and things like that, because people can take offence. Try not to eat throughout. There was a student a few years ago that came up to me and said, I'm a bit unhappy with my mark, I only get 3 out of 10. And you go, well, I think I was being incredibly generous because you only recorded something for 45 seconds and you were eating a cookie all the way through it. And at the end of it, I was really annoyed because I didn't have a cookie and I wanted a cookie. But literally, I was going to leave on this game. You know, ridiculous. So try not to eat all the way through, as if anyone with any common sense really needs to be told that. Okay, so assessment deliverables. Following 2 things. If you select option 1, a game's design document, about 2,000 words, a video recording of your game idea / pitch, that would be fine, about 5 minutes. And the following 3 things, if you select option 2, I can make these 2 options available and just write that into the coursework, which I'll make available in the next few weeks. We'll just go with the 2 options, that will probably be fine. And then you can specify which particular one you want them to go for. As I say, computer animation arts people would probably be better going for that one, but I don't see any difficulty with them trying anything. Game Maker is undeniably easy. It's one of those little game engines that sort of hides the code and everything from you and makes it slightly more difficult in terms of, you know, little check boxes or radio buttons. But if you select option 2, there's a game's design document, a Game Maker game of some description, and a video recording of your Game Maker game as well. So it's dependent on what you actually sort of check. It's a pity we don't have the labs this year because essentially, if you look at the resources that are provided by Mark over Mars, he actually has implementations of the games, so you can then check what you've done against what they've produced, and that is incredibly useful. And year after year, I would be in the labs and I'd say, a student would put up their hand and say, I'm having difficulties with this, and it's the exact same as what they've produced. And I would always say, are you sure about that? Because I bet you a £5 note that I could actually find the difference. And generally, I wouldn't take the money because I'd be too much money. But anyway, the key to being a programmer is, attention to detail, retentive attention to detail. That's the sort of main thing, the main characteristic. Okay. University courses in general, whether it's computer game development or computer animation arts, particularly programming, all really boils down to problem solving and creativity, time and patience. You've got to sit there and probably work about 8 hours a day in a module and go through it all and make sure you sort of know how to do it. There's no point in losing the head every single time you have to be confronted with a problem. You've just got to, take a breath and slowly sort of patiently look at it. And it really boils down to problem solving. Now, generally, employers do not like obstacle people. They prefer solution people. They prefer people that can come up with solutions to problems. That's my experience and my piece of advice for the day. So, problem solving is a very big business, and the more intelligent you are, the greater the challenge. Intelligence is in fact a privilege. And if you're more intelligent, the more problems you have to solve, the more enriched your life will be. You don't want to end up, after all of this, in a menial job where you're bored to death. Some people do sort of like that sort of thing, just depends what you want out of life. If you want to work in a cafe or whatever and raise a family and have no great deal of thought or career or whatever, then that's entirely up to you. That's what happiness can be based on. But if you're wanting a challenging career with tons of problems to solve on a daily basis, where and that's kind of what I wanted. I wanted to be able to walk into my work every day, not that we can anymore, but I wanted to go to work every day and be challenged on some level and have a number of things to do, so I didn't actually notice the passage of time. That sort of worked out well for me. So you really need to sort of decide what you're wanting to do, and problem solving is a big part of that. If you don't like solving problems, then there's nothing wrong with that, but think about it sort of deeply for your next step. But you're young and you've got tons of time to work these things out, and it's only the first year, so plenty of time to have a look at that. Even at the end, if you get out of it with a degree that you're potentially never going to use, you'll end up in a better position than some people. A degree, I would say, is no longer a distinguisher. You've got to have a degree, a good portfolio, and a good sort of career plan to sort of get ahead. Getting a degree is probably nowhere near sufficient anymore. It's very, very, very tough out there, particularly because of COVID-19 and other things as well. So you've got to have a good sort of career plan, and having a degree is definitely a beneficial thing. And having a portfolio is crucial in the creative industries if you're wanting to go there as well. Obviously, a degree can always act as a sort of path or a passport to the next step, further study or whatever. But we can discuss that at some future level. So do have a think about it, what you want to do, and that's university courses in general. So next week, try to access Aula. I'll try to get the pages and everything sort of published today. Introduce yourselves and do the small sort of ice-breaking task. Follow some of the tutorial guidelines. And I want to know your opinions on the assessment, if they seem doable, whether it's option 1 or option 2, and possibly, we will keep the two options in the coursework. So let me know what you think there. And lastly, enjoy, and I wish you the best of luck. And I'll get the lectures generally up by 10 o'clock on a Monday, and the rest of the material will follow rather swiftly after that. Okay, so it was lovely to meet you.